We start from West Asia. Tensions between Israel and Lebanon continue to escalate as the Israeli military intensifies its strikes on Hezbollah positions. Israel has called out 2 reserve brigades to the northern front, signaling a possible ground offensive. An Israeli infantry brigade typically has about 1,000 to 2,000 soldiers, while an armored tank brigade has about 100 tanks. Israel Army chief says the military needs to be prepared for a ground offensive against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Once again, this is breaking news from West Asia. The statement comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has so far ruled out any ground invasion while vowing to continue aerial strikes on Lebanon. Today, Israeli Air Force says its jets targeted around 280 Hezbollah sites across Lebanon. The IDF says some 60 sites belonging to the Hezbollah's Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has so far ruled out any ground invasion while vowing to continue aerial strikes on Lebanon. Today, Israeli Air Force said its jets targeted around 280 Hezbollah sites across Lebanon. The IDF says some 60 sites belonging to Hezbollah's intelligence division have been struck across Lebanon today. Lebanon reported 57 casualties and dozens more were injured, bringing the death toll to over 600 since the strikes began this week. Hezbollah is not backing down either and claims it launched rocket attacks on several Israeli towns, including Safed and Nahariya. Hezbollah says it targeted both Israeli towns and army bases. The Israeli Defense Forces, on the other hand, claims to have struck 60 Hezbollah intelligence sites, weapon depots, and rocket launchers in retaliation. The fighting has also led to a mass exodus in Lebanon, with people fleeing from Israeli bombardment. As the conflict intensifies, the United Nations reported a staggering 90,000 people have been displaced in Lebanon this week. Giorgio Cafiero is the CEO of Gulf State Analytics and professor at Georgetown University. Mr. Cafiero is joining us live from Washington, D.C. Israel, till yesterday, was saying that there will not be a ground invasion. Now the IDF chief says he's ready for a ground invasion, and additional troops have been moved to Lebanon border. So what has changed?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. It's great to be on your program today. Obviously, in the past couple of days, we have seen an alarming escalation of the hostilities between Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah. And obviously, this conflict between the two sides that really started on October 8th has entered uncharted territory. I don't know if Israel would launch another ground invasion of southern Lebanon. It's very possible, but to be sure, there are many advantages that that Hezbollah would have if this war moves in that direction. We know that when Israel launched previous invasions of southern Lebanon, it did not end well for the Israelis. And since the 1990s, 2000, and since 2006, Hezbollah has become much more powerful, much more armed. It has much more advanced technology. So I think it would be very dangerous for Israel to make such a foolish move.
Mr. Cafiero, on one end, you have global leaders calling on both Israel and Hezbollah to exercise some restraint, but none is willing to listen. What's the problem here, in your view?
I think it's a little bit rich for U.S. leaders and Western European leaders to be calling for restraint after Washington has given unconditional support to Israel for nearly 1 year now in the war on Gaza and this escalating conflict with Lebanon's Hezbollah. The U.S. always puts out these statements. The Biden administration always putting out statements calling for de-escalation, calling for restraint, voicing its opinion that Israel should do this or do that. But the U.S. continues to arm Israel to the teeth. The U.S. continues to ensure that Israel is never held accountable in any manner whatsoever. So it's really important to distinguish between the rhetoric and the actions taken by the United States as well as some other Western powers. Israel's behavior over the past year is very much attributable to the Biden administration's policies of giving Israel unconditional support without any strategic or moral considerations in play.
Mr. Kafiero, let's now talk about those rhetorics and the narratives that are being propagated day in, day out. What will be the most obvious and unfortunate consequence if this conflict spills over in the region, turns into a ground war, and ultimately becomes difficult to control?
Well, under that scenario, we could be looking at a conflict that becomes multi-continental very quickly. Have to consider how Cyprus, Egypt, Syria, Iraq, many other countries could get dragged into this to a level that they haven't so far. It has potential to be extremely catastrophic with major implications for the global economy. I think sitting here in Washington, obviously a question on my mind and question on the mind of others here is at what point might the U.S. get directly involved in the Middle East's conflicts? I think we need to be pretty clear about something. This is an objective of the Netanyahu government. Yes, there have been so many analysts talking about how Tel Aviv's focus is shifting away from Gaza toward Israel's northern front, toward southern Lebanon. Yes, that's going on, but the Israeli leadership is really looking at something way beyond just northern Israel and southern Lebanon. Their goal is to get the United States to launch military strikes against Iran. That is not something, despite the Israelis threatening to do that since the 1990s for a number of reasons beyond this conversation here, the Israelis have not done that. But what Israel's leadership wants is for the United States to bomb Iran. And I think
basically
every way in which, every instance in which the tensions and hostilities between Israel and different groups in the axis of resistance ratchet up, there's a higher probability of Israel successfully drawing the United States into these conflicts. The important thing to note, though, is that the U.S. does not want that, and Iran does not want that. Question is whether Israel is going to get the U.S. drawn in despite the Biden administration not wanting that.
All right, we'll have to end this conversation here. I've been talking to Mr. Giorgio Cafiero, who is the CEO of Gulf State Analytics and professor at Georgetown University. Mr. Cafiero, thank you for your time and for talking to us today.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.